The last poet for this week on Victorian poetry we see is Gerard Manley Hopkins, who lived between 1844 and 1889. First we will see the historical and literary context, then a brief outline of his life. We will specifically focus on the Windhover with reference to the manuscripts, the title, subtitle, then read the whole poem, analyze it, and then we have some approaches to the poem, particularly three approaches: spiritual and secular readings, post-structuralist reading, and finally a humanistic reading of this poem, the Windhover. Let us pay attention to the dates we have given. 1829, at this time there was this Catholic Emancipation Act which was passed by English Parliament to give relief for Catholics to participate in the political process. We have to remember that historically Catholics were neglected, discriminated against in England until 1829 when this act was passed. After this act was passed, from the year 1833 we find a movement called the Oxford movement. It refers to a religious revival in the Church of England, tracing its origin and practice to Roman Catholic Church led by John Henry Newman, John Keble, and Edward Pusey among others. A major event of Victorian time was this that happened in 1845. Cardinal Newman converted himself into Roman Catholic Church. Later on in 1871 we find this act being passed, Universities Test Act. This act enabled Catholics and all other different groups to study in universities and obtain degrees. Until then only Protestants who belonged to the Church of England were allowed to study in universities and obtain degrees. Incredible. During this time we find the growth of religious literature in which poets were writing about themselves and also about their relation to God. We have two famous examples here: Cardinal Newman's poem Lead Kindly Light, published in 1834, and Christina Rossetti's poem Uphill, published in 1862. Gerard Manley Hopkins was born in a prosperous Protestant family. Cardinal Newman received him into Roman Catholic Church in 1866, causing this conflict in him between priest and poet, or between poet and priest. Hopkins wrote poems and destroyed them for fear. However, he shared some of his poems with Robert Bridges, then Poet Laureate of England. Many of these poems were published in 1918 by Robert Bridges. Hopkins was a Victorian poet with a modern sensibility, often considered difficult and obscure for his imagistic, ambiguous and paradoxical language. He was overtly experimental in form, language and rhythm, and he was appreciated by poets like Pound and Eliot much later. Here we have the picture of Robert Bridges, who is remembered today because he took care to publish the poems of Hopkins. He was a poet laureate himself at that time, but then he is chiefly remembered today because he contributed to literature, British literature, by publishing the poems which he collected from Kate Hopkins, Hopkins' sister. So we can serve society in so many ways by writing poems and also by publishing poems of others. There are three manuscripts of the poem The Windhover. They are called MS1, that is A1, MS2, that is A2, and then MS3, that is B. However, there is no definite copy. Even the author signed copy is not exactly authoritative. We also have the indication of this dedication, which was added 6 years after the original composition of this poem. In all of his poems, Hopkins considered this to be his best poem. Editors have presented the poem differently to indicate their own interpretations by modifying punctuations, capitalization, line arrangements and so on. The question begins with the title and the subtitle itself, so let us pay attention to this. The title of the poem is The Windhover. It was published in 1877. This refers to a small bird of the kestrel family. The subtitle To Christ Our Lord was added in 1883, almost 6 or 7 years after composition of the original poem. So, this title and subtitle have led to serious problems like this. We have list of questions. Is the poem about Christ? Is it a spiritual poem? Is the poem about Christ through the symbol of the bird? That means, is it a symbolic poem? Is the poem about the bird? That means, is it a nature poem? Is the poem about Joan of Arc? That means, is it a historical poem? Is the poem about Hopkins' own conflictual feelings? Is it a love poem? Many critics have read this poem differently to find their own meanings from this poem. So, we have these questions, we do not have definite answers, each one will give his or her own answer based on certain evidences that they could collect from this poem and other poems or the life of Hopkins or from other accounts given by many others. Let us read the poem. This is a sonnet. So, first we have 8 lines, then we have 6 lines. I caught this morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's dauphin, dapple dawn drawn, falcon in his riding, of the rolling level underneath him, steady air and striding. High there, how he rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing, in his ecstasy, then off forth on swing, as a skate's heel sweeps smooth on a bow bend, the hurl and gliding, rebuffed the big wind, my heart in hiding stirred for a bird, the achieve of, the mastery of the thing. Brute, beauty and valor and act, oh, air, pride, plume here, buckle, and the fire that breaks from thee, then a billion times told lovelier, more dangerous, oh my chevalier, no wonder of it, sheer plod makes plough down Cillian, shine and blue bleak embers, ah my dear, foul gal themselves and gashed gold vermilion. This is a powerful poem by Hopkins. The form of the poem is a sonnet in the Petrarchan and Miltonic tradition. It has 14 lines. We have octave and sestet. The theme of the poem is secular and also spiritual love. We have to remember that Hopkins introduced 2 critical terms called inscape and instress. Inscape refers to whatness of a thing or the thingness of a thing, and instress refers to the divine energy that supports inscape and brings it alive. The inscape of the bird and the instress of Christ are beautifully brought out in this poem according to Hopkins and many other readers. Let us see the poetic devices in this poem. We have a few images in this poem. These are very powerful: flight, hovering, hurling, gliding, shine, fire, cross. These refer to the movement of the bird. Then we have the metaphor of the falcon, dauphin, chevalier, plough, Christ. Falcon is a bird, dauphin is a reference to the king of France, chevalier refers to Christ, plough refers to a ploughman, that is a farmer, and then finally we have Christ. A simile is seen in as a skate's heel, and we have this notable ambiguity according to Ensign, that is 7th type of ambiguity. It refers to the contradiction in the mind of the poet. The whole poem is a paradox because the Windhover kestrel is a bird of prey, and this is compared with Christ, and there is an element of living in death in this poem when it comes to the sacrifice of Christ. That is why this poem is paradoxical. What is remarkable about this poem is alliteration. We can see this in the whole of the poem. We have to remember that Hopkins was interested in the alliterative poetry of British literature. He was interested in old literature and medieval literature. Cod, king, morning's minion, dumb of daylight dauphin, dappled on, drawn, steady and striding, rung upon the rein, wempling wing, skate, sweep, smooth, bow, bend, heart in hiding, the achieve, the mastery, the thing, brute, beauty, pride, plume, the fire that breaks from thee, then a billion times told, sheer plod makes plow down Cillian, blue, bleak, foul, gal themselves and gash gold vermilion. Very powerful poetry, all emphatic poetry, we can say that. Then we have the connection between alliteration and sprung rhythm here. The Windhover is the best known of Hopkins' poems and its sound patterns are exemplary of his mature work. Hopkins himself has given notations for understanding the rhythm. This is an example of the sprung rhythm that he has given. I have presented it in a different form for us to understand easily. I caught this morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's dauphin, dapple, dawn drawn, falconinius, riding off the rolling level, underneath him steady, air and striding, high there how he rung upon the rein of wimpling wing. That is a kind of poetry that he wrote from his heart about nature and Christ. What is the significance of alliteration? We have a critic called Wimsatt. In an essay he has written this statement: the position of alliteration at the onset of the word makes it uniquely effective for emphasizing the stress. In the above passage, 14 of 20 stresses or 70% alliterate within their lines. That is something remarkable. 14 of 20 stresses, that is 70% stresses alliterate, contributing to this sprung rhythm. We have also assonance here, number of them. Caught this morning's dauphin, dapple, dawn drawn, wimpling wing, off forth on, heel sweeps, big wind, stirred for a bird and valor and act, broad plume, foul gal. We have some element of rhyme in this. Rhyme scheme is ABBA, ABBA, CDC and DCD. The end rhyme we have in king, wing, here, dear. We have some masculine rhyme in the case of king, wing, swing, thing, and feminine rhyme in riding, striding, gliding, hiding. In the sestet we have both masculine and feminine rhyme, here, dear, then chevalier, billion, Cillian, vermilion. We have the case of internal rhyme as well, lovelier and chevalier within the same line. Let us connect rhythm with meter now in this part. Rhythm is sprung rhythm. This is again a concept conceived by Hopkins himself. Sprung rhythm, to quote, springs from one strong syllable to the next without any pause between. We have this quotation from Wainwright to describe Hopkins' sprung rhythm. We have also given some examples of iambic, spondy, trochaic, anapest and dactyl. Here equally we have given some examples from the poem. For iambic we have I caught, spondy we have dawn drawn, for trochaic we have morning, anapest ah my dear, and dactyl striding. Some common examples also we have in between for better understanding. Now let us move on to the approaches to the Windhover. Two major approaches are always there: spiritual and secular readings with and without the Christ symbol. Hundreds of articles and volumes of books on the sonnet are available. Still, after so many writings, still it is fascinating for commentators and critics. Well known ambiguity is seventh type of ambiguity discussed by Ensign in his book 7 Types of Ambiguity. We also have a post-structuralist reading of this poem by Eagleton in his book How to Read a Poem. Then We propose a humanistic reading. We will see all this now. First, spiritual reading offered by Stoneman. God manifests in nature in all forms, including this Windhover. The bird, the poet and God buckled together, fastened together as a source of spiritual power. This is a Christian militant interpretation, and the bird diving down is an act of sacrifice. That is what Stoneman says. We have a secular reading from Litzinger. Litzinger says there is no Christ, no dive, no collapse, no wonderment. It is just like another sonnet, that is Milton's sonnet on his blindness, who says, they also serve who only stand and wait. It is a poem of the modern world. It describes a modern man's aspiration to martyrdom, which is difficult to achieve, and the dedication by Hopkins is an act of submission. That is all, says Litzinger. We have another secular reading from Helen Wendler. She proposes a new secular reading of the poem based on Hopkins' Latinate grammar in the sestet, especially the 6 nouns as objects before the contentious verb buckle. Buckle is a problematic verb in this poem. So, she explains it through Latinate grammar. It is a fantastic reading. I would suggest you to read this article, which was published in 2018. In the octave, we have past tense, that refers to the bird's action, all natural forms. Then in sestet we have present tense, this refers to the poet's reaction. There is no theology according to Wendler. She says buckle is a command to the self. She notices identity and difference. Identity in the case of I and the Windhover coming together, that is I am the Windhover, and difference to differentiate between the speaking I and the object, that is the Windhover. The bird is an animal species and I am different from that. So, Wendler says the Windhover is a sonnet of the earth, not of heaven. The poem is both tragic and sublime. Ensign identified the 7th type of ambiguity in this poem because he says this is the best illustration of the 7th type of ambiguity, referring to the contradiction due to a split in the mind of the poet. There was a split in the mind of the poet because he was drawn to nature, he was also drawn to God. So, consequently there was a conflict within him, and that conflict is reflected in this poem. So, he says Hopkins is a poet of the Windhover, he is also a priest of Christ, and that is where we have the conflict between the two. Let us see Eagleton's post-structuralist reading. According to him, language works more by compression and association than by fully spelt out connections. So, it means the poem is a compressed one. The compressed poem shows a peculiar verbal self-consciousness. According to him, the Windhover is a pretty exotic example of the play of the signifier of language focused flamboyantly upon itself. It also shows the modernist suspicion of language and even a celebration of it. The modern idea of the materiality of the signifier, that the word has its own texture, pitch and density, which poetry exploits more fully than other verbal arts. That is why we have this post-structuralist reading from Eagleton. After reading so many articles, we propose this humanistic reading. We did not find this focus on the plowman, so we thought it would be good to have this reading as well. The poem offers 3 options for living. The Windhover is an option, that is bird's life. We can be animalistic and use brute force for our existence. We can kill other animals, other things, and eat and survive. Then we have the example of Christ, who is also an option. We can be divine and use spiritual force for our own existence and for the existence of others. Then in the poem, this I find to be very important to understand this poem. there is a reference to the plough. There is a ploughman as a human being who lives for himself and for others too. At all times, all of us say that we should pay attention to farmers. I believe that the ploughman is very important for us to understand how he as a farmer lives for others and for himself too. If you follow the ploughman, we shine in our responsibility to ourselves and for others. An element of sacrifice is inevitable, but then we also have our own splendor. All three options have the power of life. We can live like the bird, we can live like Christ, we can live like the ploughman, and for me the ploughman is so appealing because the ploughman is a symbol of hard work for himself and for the rest of humanity. In summary, we have seen the historical and literary context of Gerard Manley Hopkins, who wrote this poem the Windhover in different contexts, having 3 manuscripts without any authoritative manuscript for us, giving title and also subtitle, causing so many interpretative problems. We read the poem, analyzed the poem rhetorically, poetically, and then we offered 3 approaches from critics and ourselves: spiritual and secular readings, post-structuralist reading, and finally we offered this humanistic reading. This is a fantastic poem which has generated so much of meaning. Hope you will read this again and again and enjoy it. There are some references as usual. We have given further references because we have already referred to many references within the discussion. Hope you can find at least some and increase your understanding of the poem. Thank you.